Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, July 8th, 2024. I am John Budhortz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. It was our design and intention not to podcast live this week. We actually taped 5 podcasts to have undated in the can so that we could take the week off. Abe Greenwald is abroad, and yet obviously the news of the last week has been so insanely dramatic all over the place that because I came back to the country after a week away, I thought we really had to reconvene and provide you with what limited understanding we have of this unprecedented and indeed relatively psychotic political moment, aside from our saying "I told you so" constantly. We might want to get into the weeds a little bit, and I'm just going to quickly start by saying that being out of the country as I was and being off, Frank, because I was in Europe, so I was off the time schedule. I was a little bit removed from the pitch, the hysterical pitch that seized the Democratic Party in the American media, because I was, like walking around London and Paris, and so had other things to do that were more pleasurable. And so not having felt the minute by minute agony, angst, hysteria, and all of that, I didn't quite understand, once I saw the polls, the level of Democratic panic. And I think that feeling that I had Monday and Tuesday when the polls started coming out has been justified by where things are today, where it appears that nothing short of a neutron bomb is going to get Joe Biden out of the Oval Office.
The
Does
Lord
anybody,
Jesus, the Lord Jesus will get him out.
Lord, well,
Remember,
that would be
he's
that
got
would
it.
be a
Maybe
religious
right.
version. He could be raptured, right? Jesus could literally, that would be the sort of the dispensation, beautiful version of the neutron bomb, removing him from the Oval Office. But that's my sense is nobody's got any power over him. He's down 3 points to Trump in the polls. There's at least a couple of polls, the Morning Consult polls, that do not show him suffering too badly, and that none of the polls show that if you put in Kamala, Gretchen, Gavin, Santa, anybody, that they would do appreciably better, and they might do worse. So why on earth would he go anywhere, except for the obvious reason that he shouldn't be president now at all, which we should also get to. So Matt, I'm going to turn to you because you're a very sober person and ask you.
But you
Oh,
didn't
Christine.
introduce us. I'm
Oh my
discombobulated. I've
God.
come
I didn't
back from
introduce you.
vacation and I'm
I
discombobulated.
I'm
I
totally
need my intro.
discombobulated. Okay, so, and also because Abe's not here, I always start with Abe. So, media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, I jumped the gun, but hi, John.
No, you did not. You saved me from error. Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
So, Matt, a person of sobriety and seriousness, who, again, I'm only talking here politically. I'm not talking here morally, strategically, or about the future of America, all of which I think would be best served by Joe Biden resigning today and Kamala Harris becoming president and then running an actual race. But assuming that doesn't happen, or the 25th Amendment is not invoked, do you agree with me that Biden is in an appreciably stronger position today than he was, say, a week ago, when everybody was, basically on their fainting couches?
Oh, I don't think he's in a stronger position. I do think it's unlikely he leaves the race, but he's clearly losing support within the Democratic Party. Many Democrats in private are saying he should either withdraw from the race, withdraw from the presidency, or that he's on track to lose by double digits to Trump in November. The one Morning Consult poll, yeah, sure, it wasn't terrible for Biden, but it still had him losing. It actually had him down 7 in Pennsylvania, which is the key to the election. And that's the one poll that the Biden people are pointing to. But then there were all the polls that came right out after the debate and it showed a swing toward Trump that was pretty big. Trump at 49% in one of the polls. So I don't think Biden's stronger. I do think he is not going to go anywhere. And I think what's really bothering a lot of Democrats isn't so much the fact that Biden is non-compos mentis or he has
that shouldn't bother them at all. After
no,
all,
well, they've covered it up. They've covered it up for so long. Why would it bother them now? That's not what bothers them. What bothers them is he's going to lose the election. And if you watch George Stephanopoulos' interview last week, that was the question after question wasn't about his state of mind or his health. It was, well, you're losing, right? Or wouldn't it be better for you to make room for someone who has a better chance to win? And what's driving the Democrats insane, in my view, is that Biden does not accept the fact that he's losing. Does not accept the fact that he's losing. And so when Stephanopoulos told him in this moment of kind of candor in the ABC interview last Friday night, I've never seen, Stephanopoulos said, a president with a 36% approval rating win re-election. Biden said, well, that's not my approval rating. And then Biden lied again, and he said, well, all the polls showed me losing in 2020. That is totally untrue.
Literally 2 polls out of 270 polls in 2020 showed him losing.
Over the course of a year.
And one of them was a made-up poll. Was that crazy made-up guy who doesn't exist anymore.
That's, I think, the real thrust of this among Democrats is he doesn't know. He either does not know or does not accept the fact that he's behind in this election. He is now surrounded by an inner circle that is not even the key aides who comprised the outer inner circle, if you will. It's now just the family. And in particular, Hunter Biden, the convicted felon Hunter Biden, who is his gatekeeper. And as David Axelrod wrote in this amazing CNN op-ed over the weekend, he's going to bring the Democratic Party down with him. If 3-point race, Biden loses to Trump 3 points, okay, there's a chance that the damage in the Senate isn't that bad, maybe a tied Senate or a 1-seat Republican majority. There's even a weird chance that Democrats could win back the House in that if the margin is that narrow. If this race opens up to where it could open up in the next couple months, I mean, you're looking at many more gains in the Senate for Republicans. You're looking at, for sure, a Republican House. And what's left of Biden's legacy? So I think that's where they are. And it's a scandal in itself that that's what's really motivating the panic among Beltway Democrats. It's not Biden's incapacity to serve as president. It is the fact that he is on track to lose this election bigly.
Okay. You still haven't, though, answered my question, which is everything you say is true. Democrats are very upset and worried and concerned, and they're worried he's going to lose the election. And 3 of them out of 12 billion have come out to say he needs to step aside. It doesn't matter. I don't care if the entire Democratic Governors Association came out and said he needs to step aside. I don't care if Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer went to him and said, you need to step aside. He's sitting there saying, Trump's ahead by 3.3%. I've been counted out before. Let me tell you, Corn Pop was threatening me. I didn't let that Corn Pop do it to me. I'm not going to let you guys do it to me. And it is this weird analogy to Trump saying, it's the media and the Washington elites that are trying to drive me out of this race, but I'm here for you. And Hunter doesn't want him to go, and Jill doesn't want him to go, and who knows who his close aides are who want him to go. And if his chief of staff, Jeff Zients, or however it's pronounced, or like a couple of senior officials don't come out on the portico of the, West and say, or come out somewhere and say, I am resigning today because the president cannot possibly serve in office any longer. There is no earthly pressure that can get him to quit the race. He should quit the race, but he doesn't think he needs to quit the race, and therefore he is not going to quit the race because, according to him, he's not losing. He already forgot the bad poll numbers that he was mentioned, that he was, maybe he's not looking at them. According to Mark Halperin, the private polling among Democrats is even worse than the public polling. He is holding on to one thing, I think, which is that the Morning Consult poll in Michigan has him up 3 points. So that's the one poll that shows him in the lead. He could get a lot worse. Everything could get better. He did this exactly in the worst possible way, which is if he'd done this last year, right? If he had said, I'm not running for re-election, I came to reestablish normalcy, and I'm putting my plow down and I'm going home. I'm Cincinnatus, did what I had to do. He would be a hero for the rest of his life and for, centuries after, and a model of probity and all this. And he couldn't let go of power. And he could, now anything he does is humiliating. If he runs, he's likely to lose. He'll be humiliated. If he doesn't run, he quits. He quits basically under pressure when he doesn't want to do it. That'll be humiliating. But they have no way to drive him from office.
They have no alternative, because Kamala, if what is being revealed about his state is true, and the Washington press corps suddenly discovered how to do their jobs in the last 48 hours, which is kind of hilarious, she's complicit too. And any good Republican ad campaign is going to point that out over and over and over. She is on the record defending his acuity, defending his vigor in a way that's clearly false. And the one thing, look, this is not a time to gloat and say, I told you so. I think you're right to mention that we're going to try not to do that. The one thing I will say I told you so about, not in a gloating fashion, but because it's been my obsession and y'all have tolerated it for years. This is why we should have public records of who comes and goes in any presidential residence, especially the Delaware Beach House. Obviously, a lot of what's been uncovered about Biden seeing a Parkinson's specialist and other neurological doctors coming to the White House. That's all now suddenly being revealed. But this is why the public should know who hangs out with the president on a regular basis, because obviously if a cover-up is being facilitated by his close inner circle, this is one of the ways that the curious press, which we didn't have until recently, would have found it out. But Kamala is a problem. She doesn't want to go either, and she's polling even worse than he is, although there have been some polls in the last few days I know that suggest she would do better. I mean, they're in a real bind, and I'm not sure what they can't have an open primary again.
There
I mean, they actually
no day.
There's no. I know.
Can we get to the day point?
There's just a few
conversations have we had with civilians where people say they can't let this go on. They're going to have to do something. Since the Citizens United decision, I would argue before Citizens United, since Barack Obama decided to burst through the spending cap in 2008 that meant if you raised $250 million, the federal government would give you $250 million. Right? That was the spending cap rule before. And Obama was raising so much money so fast, he was like, well, I'm gonna sacrifice the federal match and see how far I can go. And he raised $1 billion. So that was the end of all party control, I would say. In other words, like if you thought, okay, this is as much as I can raise, and therefore if we choke you off, you're a dead person. Well, that's no longer the case anymore. And then Citizens United basically, which I think was a properly decided decision, but had this terrible ancillary consequence, which is that there is no check on the president's authority from his own political party or the president's political authority or something like that. So they got, what do they got? What do they got to, what they, well, who was the they?
Okay, so the party,
as I said, I think his chief of staff could take him down, but that's the only person.
He's not even, I don't even think the chief of staff is part of the outer inner circle. I mean, I think that the outer inner circle is folks like the Donnellans and Richettis and Nita Dunn, the people who have been working,
Hoffman,
the guys around him, and ladies around him for decades. And then the inner circle is the family. But at the end of the day,
you need the body man to resign.
The body man who would say he has Parkinson's.
At the end of the day, it's the individual's decision, right? So the party didn't tell LBJ to withdraw from the race in the spring of 1968. LBJ himself decided, because of his own, psychodrama, that he did not want to run again for re-election. Nixon, so then this thing about leverage here. Nixon decided to resign from office after the conversation, the dinner at the White House, where Barry Goldwater came and basically in a kind of a corner, sidebar, said, you have like 11 votes not to convict you in the Senate. And I don't really know if I'm one of them or not. And that's when Nixon knew. Okay. So what are the points of leverage that would make Biden reconsider running for re-election or even remaining in office through January 20th of next year? I mean, Republicans would love to impeach him. And funnily enough, if they did impeach him in the House, it'd be interesting to see what the Democrats in the Senate would do now. But that's not really going to be a live option. And the other is the 25th Amendment, which is so extraordinary. And as Christine says, Kamala's complicit in this too. Are they really going to do something like that? So I agree, John. I don't see him leaving the race because
that's why they have to concentrate on the fact that he's losing the race and not any particular moral or ethical aspect of it, because that's once you admit that there's wrongdoing, then suddenly that's right? Then that suddenly the administration is all hooked up in this. But if you can just say to him, be Harry Truman, right? You can run again, but the polls are giving you an easy way out here to be a hero and say, instead of losing, I'm going to do this for democracy, right? Harry Truman could have run again, but he said, we have a 2-term, norm, and we want to get back to the 2-term norm.
You're talking about
52.
You're talking about 52
yes.
Truman,
and
right?
52,
not 48
Truman. Right, in 52, because Truman could have theoretically run for a third term legally, but he said, we have these two. But, really, he was also losing in the polls, and his numbers were down and all that. And the save democracy excuse gave him the perfect out. But Biden isn't convinced by the save democracy excuse. That's the sort of thing that has worked in the past, precisely because it's up to the president. But I will say, I'll say this. This is not to defend Biden per se, but to tell you that I think you can understand where he's coming from in the refusal to accept reality, because the New York Times has a story about the voters, a certain segment of voters, not wanting him to step down or not liking the public pressure for him to step down. It's hard to tell which, but one of those groups is Black voters. And the Times says in the story something very interesting, which is that Black voters are, and I don't know if this is true, this is what's being reported. Black Democratic voters are seeing the shove Biden overboard movement as a white thing. Now, what's interesting about this is the person who would become president if you shoved him overboard is Black. So it's fascinating to see if that's really, the case. But I think the point that they're making is that there's the same divide that you did have in the primaries in 20, and then in the hectoring in the general election and stuff, which was you had the same sort of divisions in the party, and the people who were telling him he's going to lose are telling him he's going to lose, and the people who didn't want him to be the nominee are telling him he's going to lose, but the people who saved him are telling him to stick it out. And I think he's seeing that and saying that is similar to what happened in 2020, that the divisions, the people backing me now are the people who backed me then, and they were right. And the people who are naysayers really were naysayers from the beginning, and there's nothing I can do to satisfy them because they didn't want me in the first place. I think he's seeing that dynamic, and that is something that you can understand, at least him being defensive of not wanting to give in to people he thinks are going to hate him no matter what.
You can totally understand this because it's never happened before. What he is being asked to do is something that no one has ever done before at the presidential level, which is quit the race 4 months before the election. I mean, let's just pull back and just examine the oddity of the circumstance here. One Democrat, a somewhat flaky congressman from Missouri, stood up last year and said, Joe Biden can't be president again. There's something, he's too old, which was his way of saying, not just that he's too old, but there's something wrong with him. And he was mocked. There was a total press blackout on him, understandably, because he didn't have any money.
You're talking about Dean Phillips.
Dean Phillips, right.
He's from Minnesota.
Minnesota. I apologize. He is, of course, and he's also Dear Abby's grandson, which is the best one, and Eliana Johnson's cousin. So we should also.
And he was right. He was vindicated.
And he was one guy in the entire party. Now, who knew that he shouldn't run again? We knew that he shouldn't run again. So the question is, why didn't they know? And why didn't they do something? I'll give you an example. Ron DeSantis ran against Trump, right? And failed utterly. Granted, DeSantis had a window. He was Trump had lost. Trump had screwed up the 2020 Senate race. Trump, and DeSantis was the most popular Republican outside of Trump. And Trump was still winning by 30 points or whatever it was when DeSantis got in the race, and DeSantis got in the race and others got in the race and all of that. Not one Democrat, not one. And then he made a valiant effort in some fashion or other. He couldn't figure out a way to run against Trump because he couldn't raise all of Trump's liabilities because the Republican Party viewed them as Democratic talking points. And so he went nowhere. But not one serious, prominent Democrat stood up and said, this guy has to go. Lyndon Johnson was domestically the single most successful president that the United States has ever seen in terms of legislation. And Eugene McCarthy, a senator from a relatively undistinguished state, but like a serious person and somebody that people took seriously, ran against him. And that one serious bid. Now, granted, the Vietnam War is going on.
I'm just saying everything. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Everything is interpreted through the prism of how do the Democrats in the media stop Donald Trump from coming back to office. And up until debate night, Democrats in the media believed that Joe Biden was the best chance to stop Donald Trump from coming back to office. Now, there was plenty of evidence to the contrary.
Right.
Evidence that we've been talking about on the podcast for over a year. But many Democrats and many in the media still believed, okay, Biden is flawed. Biden may be kind of declining, but he's still the only person who has defeated Trump. And he's still somewhat competitive, toss-up race to beat him in November.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why all of the episodes prior to the debate were kind of shunted to the side. So whether it was the Wall Street Journal story, right, which we said on the podcast was clearly kind of an iceberg type story. They showed the tip of the iceberg, but we're not revealing the entirety of what has been going on with Biden. Whether it was the immigration event where Biden didn't know who Mayorkas was, whether it was the Juneteenth celebration where he kind of just descended into babble, or whether it was those moments during the Normandy visit where he clearly seemed out of it. It was all kind of dismissed, ignored, evaded because, okay, we're in this election, we have to stop Trump. So what happens? The debate happens, and it's clear Biden will not stop Trump. He's not going to be able to do it. It will be a miracle upon miracle if he somehow wins this in November. And that's when the panic happened. And the panic happened like as soon as Biden shuffled onto that stage, it was clear that the Democrats were freaking out, saying, oh my God, he's going to lose. And so now all of the energy that was used to dismiss the concerns about his age are now reflected back on him to drive him out of the race. And it's Democrats and media saying, get out, get out, get out, get out, because we have to stop Trump. That's all that matters to them.
I want to, Christine.
Isn't there something else? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, no.
I was just gonna say the isn't there also the fact that now they see that the trial and conviction are not going to knock Trump out.
Everything has failed.
Pre-debate, there was also this idea that if the sort of superstructure could get together and just kind of bury Trump in rubble, that Joe Biden could shuffle along anyway. That was sort of the last line of defense too, I think, in a way.
No, Biden's theory first was, okay, I'm going to flood the economy with money, and all these working class types who voted for Trump in 2016, and a lot of them still voted for Trump in 2020, they're going to benefit so much from my opening the faucet of the spigot of federal dollars that they're going to reward me. Well, that clearly has not worked.
Right.
Then the argument is, well, Donald Trump is such a threat to democracy that you have to vote for Biden and the Democrats because he alone, Biden, can defeat Trump and save American democracy. Well, that's not really working out either, because many polls show that people actually trust Trump more on democracy than Biden. Yeah. Then the theory was, okay, well, if these arguments aren't working, Trump will be so stained by these various investigations and the conviction that the public will find him completely unelectable. Well, that hasn't worked out either. So none of the arguments are working. And what's fascinating is, John, you mentioned earlier this line now that, well, now Biden's just like Trump. He's going against the media. He's going against the establishment. Yeah, well, people, a lot of people don't like Trump. So why is that a good thing that Biden is now like Trump? And by the way, becoming like Trump, he's removing all of the arguments that he used to advance on his behalf. So Biden's whole argument, even at the debate, was Trump only cares about himself. I care about this country. Well, does it seem like Biden actually cares about the country?
Well,
if the only person he's listening to is his, I'm sorry, screwed up son, and he's saying to everybody,
"Why are you sorry?"
Well, it's his family.
You don't need to be sorry.
This is where the Stephanopoulos interview, the Stephanopoulos interview, which was meant to show him, to sort of calm nerves in the party and say, look, steady hand, let's stick with the horse we have, actually undermined that. It's a really important point, because that's where I thought was the most Trump-like, not in demeanor at all, but in sensibility. And it was literally, the Lord Jesus Christ has to come down and tell me to stop running, because otherwise I'm too important. I'm going to do that. And there was also this weird sort of self-helpish vibe to what he said. He's like, I'm just going to do my best, and whatever happens, I know I'll really have tried.
Well, right.
I'm like, that's not the job.
So that answer is important too, because Stephanopoulos said to him, well, what happens if you lose? Right. What will you think? And Biden said, well, as long as I did my goodest, which is what he said, despite the White House is now trying to revise that. But I heard him say that.
Yes.
As long as I did my goodest and worked really hard, I'll be fine with it. Hold it. I thought you're in this because Trump is going to be a dictator.
The country's soul is at stake.
5 days ago, you told the country that the Supreme Court just made Trump a dictator with their immunity ruling. And now you're saying, well, as long as I give it my best shot, I'm going to be happy with what I did.
There's another point to the democracy argument that he's been making, which, as you're correct to note, has not really stuck, but has been very effective for party unity on the Democratic side. Like this idea that we're the only people who can save democracy. Well, I think the average American, and this, I think, includes African-American and union voters who he's returning to now, cynically late in the game to rescue him. They look at how Dr. Jill, Hunter Biden, the inner circle of a handful of aides, have done a massive cover-up about this guy's condition. And whether or not you believe the press, how much they knew and what they were willing to tell, I tend to be deeply cynical about what the media was willing to be honest about in this situation. The truth is, they're running his presidency like a king with very loyal courtiers, keeping everybody else out. There was no transparency. There has been no honesty. There have been not just dissembling, but outright lies told to the public over and over again, which are laundered by a totally compliant press. That is not democracy, actually. That's not democracy at all. And I think that is what people saw in both during the debate and in the aftermath with all the chaos that's ensued.
Okay, I want to go high and I want to go low. Here's the high. The high is that everything Christine said is very important, because simple fact of the matter is, let's pour one out for truth. By which I mean the idea that in politics, and when you cover politics, when you write about politics, even if you're a if you're a polemicist, that you fix on a goal and then you try to push everything toward the goal that you have. So if the goal is Trump cannot be president any longer, you tell yourself or lie to yourself or something that many things have to be subordinated to that goal, because that goal is overarching and overreaching. And if that means not voicing your concerns about Biden's condition or his circumstances, because you can't game it out what will happen. You can't game out what will happen. All you can see is if you say in 2023, I don't really think he should run again, and you're a serious Democrat, or you run against him, or you are a journalist who writes essays about his incapacities or something like that, that you will harm the ultimate goal, which is to keep Trump from taking office again. Once you go down that path, you're sunk, because it's sort of like a Ponzi scheme in which you have to keep playing the same game, or you discredit the previous things that you've done to further the scheme. When you can't say, okay, I'm done. You know what? He really needs to go. And he's really in bad shape, and the American public needs to know that. If you just started from the position of, we have two political parties, they're basically a parity. If Joe Biden evanesced, if he were raptured and disappeared, and Kamala Harris became president, or there were a serious race for the presidency, whoever that Democrat is would get 45% of the vote, and the Republican would get 45% of the vote. So you don't have to stick with Joe Biden. We're in a different period. And we can sort of just tell the truth, report the facts, lay out the facts as they are, talk about things that you talked about every week, Christine, like the fact that he's in Rehoboth 4 days a week to hide from Washington, that he doesn't commune with people in his party, that he doesn't take advice from leaders in his party, that he is in a very weird, isolated palace court situation, and that, what would have been better served, Democrats would have been better served from the beginning of the Biden term to be talking, and reporters and everybody on the left to be speaking the truth about the condition of the country, because then the country would be in a better position to make the political choices that it needed to make, and might actually have therefore been more welcome to a serious Democratic primary in 2024, in which Biden, if he ran, would have to defend his record, or a Democrat could emerge out of the miasma who would say, I'm a better steward for the future of this country. That could have been, it can't be Kamala because she's the vice president, but it could have been Newt, could have been Whitmer, could have been Amy Klobuchar again, it could have been Josh Shapiro, though I don't think a Jew could ever win as we've learned over the last 9 months in this current Democratic Party.
No, this is not a year for a Joe Lieberman.
No, this is, well, I don't think I'm just saying, yeah, but I mean, it could have been anybody, and therefore you would have had a more honest reckoning and somebody who could have come at Trump fresh, right? The idea that he's the only one who beat Trump, that's a bad data set, because only 2 people have run for president against Trump.
I think this is a very important point, if I can just underscore it, because I think there's been no better way to identify hacks in the press than by their reaction to the debate. Because one Nobel laureate comes to mind, Paul Krugman, literally days before the debate was saying, don't believe what Republican are telling you about Biden. This is all cheap fakes, and Trump is, the terrible threat, and so we have to rally behind Biden. And then the day after the debate, Krugman says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Biden has to go." So, and you can, give me some time to compile the clips, and we can
Well,
go through
Secretary
like
of
10
State
of
Tom
them.
Friedman. You have
Yeah,
been
Tom
calling
Friedman the same
Tom
way,
Friedman,
right? And
Secretary of State.
so
He is
there have been
clearly,
people. On the other hand, there are people like David Brooks and E.J. Dionne who are kind of genuinely confused. Like they don't know what to do. And I kind of respect that because they're being honest and they're not just following this party line, which literally up to the moment he stepped foot on stage, the party line was Biden is fine. Don't you dare question Biden. Biden is fine. We're going to November. And then by the time he left the stage, it was, we have to get rid of Biden. we have to lose Biden.
Lower the
Biden
boom.
is taking us to disaster. And they did it the same type of flip with Kamala prior to last week. It was, well, Kamala is Biden's insurance policy because she's so unpopular and so incompetent. There's no way anyone would ever want her to be at the top of the ticket. Then next week happened and they all switched. It is like the Comintern. And all of a sudden is Kamala Harris is having her moment. She's got such an edge. And, really, it's kind of racist and disrespectful that we haven't given her the credit she deserves. She deserves no credit, by the way. She hasn't changed at all. But the line is, we have to do what it takes to stop Trump. There's one poll that shows she's slightly more competitive than Biden, so therefore it's her moment. What's interesting is in the past 48 hours, it seems, the line has switched again to, well, we're going to have the blitz primary. When Biden takes the press conference stage on Thursday and says, I'm withdrawing from the race for president, now we're going to have the blitz primary, and we're going to set it up so that Kamala could compete for sure, but we're also going to have the mini little town halls and the 5 regional debates so that people like Newsom and Whitmer and Pritzker and Shapiro can come and play too.
You know what? I would like to reorganize all of sports so that baseball teams will play football teams in a showdown. What the hell are people talking about? It's July 8th.
Can I just say, by the way, that
July 8th. When is all this magically going to happen?
To reinforce
They're going to magically organize a new primary system with new people and new places with events taking place and all. Like this
it would
country,
be for the
you
delegates,
can't get a bus tour going somewhere
they wouldn't
without 3 weeks of preparation.
CNN will have the forum, and it will be, this is the best part, is the Olympics. That will be the moment. Because of the Olympics starting a little bit later, you have the Republican convention next week. So again, I don't believe any of this is going to happen, but it's fun
delightful.
to fantasize it.
Are you suggesting a pole vaulting contest?
Right. Well, you could merge them. But Biden, in this logic, Biden withdraws by the end of this week, setting up the blitz primary. You have the Republican convention next week, so the Republicans will dominate the headlines. But then you prepare for the week after, which is around the time the Olympics begin, I think the week before the opening ceremonies. That's when you start the blitz primary, and you have until the end of August, because the Democratic convention is pushed back until after the Olympics. You have the month of August to settle on your new nominee. And sure, maybe that will be Kamala Harris in the end, but the blitz primary people say, shouldn't we have a more robust competition and allow all these new talents to emerge in this great chorus that will really emphasize, because the Democratic Party is so unified on issues like Israel, for example.
This is why I wanted to go low. So I started high, right? I'm speaking about truth and the virtues of truth. And I think Republicans, even ones who love Trump, should understand that Trump's difficulty with the truth is one of the reasons that he was a failure. He failed as president and failed to get reelected. That it was impossible to trust what he said, that when push came to shove in the course of a crisis, he did not have the trust of the American people because he hadn't earned it. He was inconstant and weird. And so trust is a good thing and truth is a good thing. And it's bad to lie, and it actually doesn't help you in the long run, and it might be better, to reset the table. Now I'm going to go low. I am loving this so much. This is so great. What is happening is so great. And you know why? Because I have been listening for 8 years as an anti-Trump conservative. I have been listening to this mob of people, many of whom were my friends, many of whom were people with whom I agreed for many years, taking this turn toward this pompous sense of preachment about the reality of the world and the nature of Trump's distortion of the reality of the world, and how he was doing things that were uniquely so horrible that they changed all of the nature of reality, and everything that he did was monstrous. And anybody who wasn't exactly in the place of thinking that he was the second coming of Hitler was effectively some kind of handmaiden to Trump's power. And that there were, of course, many Republicans and Republican hacks who I don't think they deserve that condemnation, but who were willing to sacrifice their own integrity to the idea that he was uniquely wonderful and well suited to everything and all of that. To see them hoist on their own petard, to the kinds of arguments that I would have with never Trumpers who had gone a little beyond never Trump and just actually joined the Democratic camp, or Democrats or liberals who had respected me, let's say, because I was anti-Trump in 2016, though it seemed to be costly or something like that. To see them with their preening, smug, smirking, humorless advocacy of this left-wing, redistributionist, inflation-causing, international weakness promoting, America reputation declining, senile guy, I am just, Schadenfreude doesn't even begin to describe my feelings about the pain that they are in. I hope that this does go. The only reason I think it would be better for America if Biden quit today. I do. I think it would be the best thing. It would be better for the country. It would be he should quit today. Kamala should become president, and we should run the election that way. He's not fit to be president. He's not cognitively fit to be president. But that's probably not going to happen. So if it's not going to happen, I want them to continue to suffer because they have not contributed.
Changed.
Okay.
But that's so here's the thing, though, that their rhetoric hasn't changed. It is built around the idea that what would be bad for democracy is if Joe Biden loses to Donald Trump, and therefore supporting Joe Biden staying in the race is bad for democracy. There's been no recognition that the massive cover-up of a presidential health deterioration that everybody knew, and the scolding of people who were right from the beginning, that was bad for democracy. There's been no sort of self-reflection on, everything they knew going into this, and the process that has led up to it. That's the thing. I mean, Charlie Cook writes this piece at National Review where he says, he makes an interesting point, which is, the press is saying we got fooled, right? And others are saying, well, if you got fooled, then there was a massive cover-up. So will you be investigating that? Not trying to drive Biden out of the race, because that's the coverage you see. And it's the same with the people that you're talking about, because there is this sense that what they're saying, as long as Biden does drop out, then democracy has acquitted itself, and there has been no harm to democracy done by everything that's happened since Biden has been in office and through the campaign. They have rested everything on the idea that as long as he drops out, they're not culpable for anything. There's no suffering they need to have.
Well, and that there's another cascade effect here for the voters who will actually decide this election, that small group of undecided voters. And that's that if they lied to us about the condition of the president and the media was complicit in it, we knew they were lying to us about inflation, the cost of our grocery bill. We knew they were lying to us about, oh, it's great to give the student loan debt transfer to all these people. These are like these working class Americans who are like, our lives economically have sucked for a few years. And they kept telling us to stop complaining. They didn't empathize. They didn't acknowledge the problem. They told us to stop complaining. So I do think there's that larger trust issue. If they lied to us about this, then what else are they lying to us about? That's a genuinely useful political tool for the Republicans if they figure out how to use it. And we should add, Trump has been very quiet, very, very quiet. Which has been very good for his campaign, but that's not going to last forever either. And we'll see what the tone of the convention is next week.
So here's the thing about the threat to democracy argument, and we can now bring in the results in Britain and France in the last week as an example of what I'm talking about, which is if there is a threat to democracy, it is not from Trump or from Biden. If democracy is in crisis, it is because of the nature of America and the American people that we have gotten to this point. The American people will get what they want, and they'll get it good and hard. That's what H.L. Mencken said. We see in Britain that 15 years of increasingly incompetent and insular conservative rule led to this gigantic political humiliation, except it's a very complicated political humiliation because Labor won this gigantic election with no more votes than they got when they lost a gigantic election 4 or 5 years ago. They were just distributed far better. And the populist candidate, Farage, got way more votes than anybody could have anticipated, but they were badly distributed. America should understand that this can happen in countries outside of the United States. This is like an electoral college problem, the thing that people complain about the electoral college. And something very similar just happened in France, where it looked like the Le Pen party or the Le Pen movement was maybe going to really win this election. And then there was some strategic voting and in the right places, and it was distributed in the right way. And so while they performed way more impressively than they have before, instead, in denying them, but this crazy left-wing coalition has now won this election, and God knows what's going to happen in France, because you have a populace that is leaning right and a government that is leaning far left. And you could have that here in the United States. So my point is that Trump is not a unique threat to our democracy. The democracies of the West are undergoing some kind of a systemic loss of faith in their own institutions all over the place. And Biden is the flip side of the Trump thing. So Trump is the strong hand who, in the fantasy of people, is going to destroy the country by adopting fascist tactics. And Biden is the leader from Sleeper, who is only a nose. He's in a video and he's in a wheelchair and he talks about everything, but basically all that's left of him is the nose, and they have to clone him back to life using his nose. And so either way, that's not good for our democracy. It's not good to have somebody who talks about strongmen and who seems to want to end the war in Ukraine badly, and whatever, however you want to look at it in policy terms. This was a delusion of the anti-Trump class that the problem here rested with Trump, and you could extirpate Trump and you could somehow solve the problem of the democracy, because it is the Democrats and Democrat-aligned people who have made this country into a sewer in the last 9 months over the Israel-Gaza war. That is not Republicans. It's not Trump. It's them. Those are people, they want to vote for them. And the president of the United States in his re-election campaign started readjusting his politics to try to take account of and not alienate and not drive away people whom he should have been at the forefront of denouncing and saying should not play a part in our national political system. So, like, this world of the anti-Trump people, dear friends of mine, Bob Kagan in his book and Anne Applebaum in her book and all of that, they engaged in some kind of a delusion that what we were seeing from Biden, that they could have expanded out their critique to deal with the fact that this is a systemic problem in the United States of a lack of trust in our institutions on both sides, and a failure of leadership, because you just think, you know what, the other guy is so much worse than I am that I get a free pass. I can do anything. Did that make any sense?
That's what Biden thought.
Yeah.
So my read of what's been happening overseas is that actually the populist right is taking more from what used to be the center right and is not actually achieving majority status, or is not performing as well as one might expect it to in various circumstances. So earlier in the spring, we had Modi, the Indian prime minister. His party underperformed in the elections, and his third term is going to be much weaker than many people expected. In the UK, I mean, that's a very complicated situation. That really has to do with the failure of Cameronism, I think. David Cameron, who tried to move the Tory party, the Conservative Party, to the left over many years. And you look at some of what Rishi Sunak, the former prime minister,
who was brought back to save it.
Right. He was brought back as foreign secretary in the last months. But, Sunak talks about green energy, they're not very conservatives, the conservatives. Yeah. And of course, Nigel Farage, the leader of Remain, and then the leader of Reform now, he basically splintered the right. And that allowed Labour to have this amazing showing. And in France, too, what Macron's gamble partly paid off, and then also seems to have horribly backfired, because he called the snap election thinking, okay, I'm actually going to force French voters to decide, do they really want Marine Le Pen and her party to run the parliament, because they had this great election for the European Parliament earlier this year. And in the first round, Le Pen did very well. And so, okay, it doesn't look very good for Macron. But then he and then this far left coalition basically engaged in it's called the Republican Front. They started trading off support to limit Marine Le Pen's party's gains. And what emerged from the election is that no party will have a workable majority in the National Assembly. And in fact, the party that seems to have benefited the most is this far left party that contains some horrible elements.
Wildly anti-Semitic.
Yes. Yeah. And Labour, too. Look, Keir Starmer, I think, did a good job of de-Corbynizing the party. However, Corbyn, who the anti-Semitic Labour leader, he's back. And there are some pro-Gaza types. And Starmer has said that actually the UK will recognize the ICC's arrest warrants for Netanyahu.
Well, David Lammy, his
foreign secretary,
secretary said, yes, that if Bibi Netanyahu set foot on British soil, essentially, he would have him arrested.
So, just to take it to America for a second, I think that one reason the press allowed itself to be diluted is that Democrats have been doing pretty well, all things considered, just like left parties more broadly. And the assumption was, oh, well, if the Democrats are doing well in 2022, they're outperformed. If they're outperforming expectations in special elections, if whenever there's a pro-choice ballot measure at the state level, it wins, well, then we should be fine. We should be competitive with Joe Biden. What the Democrats seem to have, to me, is a Biden problem. Like, the problem is actually specific to Biden. And the voters just don't like him. And they've given him very low approval ratings. They don't think he's fit to be the president because of age and infirmity. And the issue there is Democrats have become to realize that their Biden problem is actually going to sink their party, which without Biden could have a more respectable showing, could even overperform like these other left parties have been doing in the last 6 months.
Okay, so you just made a very good argument that what I said was nonsense, because in fact, what happens here is that the public, as I read your interpretation, the public is way more seasoned and prone to gradations of ideological, where it goes ideologically. That's what the weird part of the French election is. On the one hand, it denied Le Pen this big victory, and on the other hand, she is clearly trending toward, or her movement is trending toward, victory at some point, and that this is some weird last gasp. And the way the last gasp is going to show itself is through this merger of the center left and the far left that is ungovernable, as we could see last night when the far left won the election and then burned
rioted
half of Paris
and burned
down.
Paris. Yes, yeah.
It's like one of those things where a baseball
like
team,
when you win the
city,
Stanley Cup, and Vancouver wins the Stanley Cup and then
when you win. That's not, that doesn't speak well for your future in the mainstream.
The two cities, Paris and Philadelphia, win or lose, riot.
Right. Anyway, and that in this case, yeah, the Democrats and voters, generally speaking, have responded properly in some ways to the situations that have been placed before them, in this sense, which is that in 2022, Donald Trump, when he was a worse politician than he is now, decided to back lunatics for the Senate and won the Senate for the Democrats by doing so. A circumstance that nobody anticipated. And it wasn't because Democrats were in such good odor with the American voter. It was that you weren't going to vote for Herschel Walker. He was too crazy. And Carrie Lake, she was too crazy. You weren't going to vote for these people. And so in 2024, Trump has been more rational. In 2020, you had a choice between Trump, who had been what he had been on COVID and everything like that, or Biden, who at least hadn't been Trump. And so these are choices that the voters are making in a more flavored sense. In a larger sense, then the problem here is maybe not voters, and I'm mischaracterizing it. It is elites. It is the behavior of Republican elites who were out of touch with the interests of Republican voters, including us, maybe 2013 to 2016, and created this crazy lane for Trump to drive right through with an 18-wheel truck and win the election. And now we have the Democrats so convinced that their sole purpose is to keep Trump from office, while they are moving the party far more left than they have any reason to allow it to from electoral results, and doing things that they shouldn't really have done, like spend $6 trillion over and on top of, or several $1 trillion over and on top of COVID relief spending. And now they're reaping the whirlwind or something like, and they think that they should get a pass because Trump is so bad.
Yeah, I'll be more specific.
Yeah.
It's not just elites, it's the media. I mean, the media has just beclowned itself with its coverage of the race and of the debate. And you think about how the lines that the media representatives have taken on Biden and Harris, the same things they said about the COVID pandemic, right? They were wrong about that too. Ferguson, Michael Brown, the Black Lives Matter movement, they completely got wrong. Media's been horrible on Israel. I mean, just go down the list. There's never been 10 days where I've despised the media more than the last because the
10 days that shook Matt's faith.
10 days that shook Continetti, right? Because the hackery is just so public and the partisanship is just so public. They're the problem.
I mean, I think they are, but I mean, so is the professor, so is everything that trains them, so is their support structure.
Oh, the Washington Post meltdown, the same thing. That's what we were talking about before the debate. Everything. They're so immature and they're so conformist, and they're just wrong.
But I mean, it's like this, and then I think we can we'll talk about this for the rest of the week, but everybody understood, even though a conviction was secured, that the Bragg case was garbage. Everybody, left-wing law professors, everybody understood that the case was garbage, that you were elevating a misdemeanor into a felony. And yeah, if you get it into a New York courtroom, maybe you could get yourself a conviction. And there was this moment of truth-telling, brief moment of truth-telling when the indictment came down that said, oh, come on, this isn't good. And then, of course, that is actually what finally, I mean, it didn't finally take out DeSantis or Nikki Haley or anything like that, but it finally consolidated Trump's support, because it's like, you know what, his argument is really true. They'll do anything to get him. We can't let them control the fate of the country like this. That's terrible. Then he gets the conviction, and then suddenly it's like, oh, this was great. This is fantastic.
Convicted felon Donald Trump.
It's really great. He's a convicted felon Donald Trump. Well, you think the American
34 counts.
You think people aren't capable of looking at a conviction and saying it's garbage? Enough people are capable of looking at it and saying it's garbage for it not to have any sustained political effect. Now, it's even, I thought it would have more of an effect than it's had. But I mean, every step of the way, Fani Willis's case in Georgia, she thought she had a free pass. So yeah, I'm going to hire my boyfriend. I'm going to pay him $650,000. Why can't I? I'm going after Donald Trump.
They think the American people are stupid, John. I mean, that's actually, at the end of the day, they think we're fools. They think we can be duped. They think we can be manipulated. They think all of these things. And I would say that viewpoint has been exposed to be far more powerful on the left these days than on the right. And that sort of, it's not even snobbishness. It goes beyond that. It is such a lack of respect for common sense and the wisdom of the people. Mm-hmm. And I know, look, we can be pretty elitist ourselves in our various bubbles, but the truth is, people will not put up with that forever. They put up with a lot, but they will not put up with it forever. And it's actually could be a very useful cleansing of the American narrative on the part of the elite media in particular, if they're forced to reckon with the fallout from this.
And the other thing we're hearing a lot of is the foreign officials saying, yeah, man, he was asleep at the wheel when he came to Munich or something like that. That's the other thing that forces the press's hand. Certain degree. Obviously the debate is the main thing that forced the press's hand, but in the wake of the debate, we're seeing all these stories with foreign diplomats saying, yeah, I mean, he doesn't look good. He didn't seem to be paying attention at dinner. It's like, let's ask these questions, or we've already asked these questions, but we didn't print the quotes. Maybe we should print the quotes now. I'd say, by the way, 6 months ago, in Riga, Latvia or whatever, he looked terrible. And so that's part of this too, which is just that there's always this kind of America centrism, especially in an American election, which is totally understandable. But the left is more susceptible to, hey, the world thinks we look like idiots than the right is. And the world's judgment and the world's this and they are, it's like John Kerry and the global test. And they're more affected by this, and that goes for the press as well. And it's harder for the press to keep the herd mentality on that, because they believe in this stuff, and they believe that it matters what happened at the NATO conference or what happened at this conference. And it matters that, a French diplomat off the record was grumbling about Biden being asleep at the wheel and stuff like that, and stuff that might not affect a Trump MAGA, alliance the same way.
That's a great 2004 callback, Seth. The global test.
Global
I had not thought about that in 20 years. So I appreciate it.
Global test. Well, we've run long, so I think we'll forego the recommendations today, and maybe we do have a Republican convention coming up in 7 days, so we'll also need to take account of this question of who might be Trump's vice president, which I think has probably altered. His calculations have surely altered themselves over the last 10 or 11 days based on what the new political realities are. And I had said before that Trump is a different politician from the politician he was in 2022. And I would also like, as we go on this week, to talk about this distancing that he chose to do from this ambitious Heritage Foundation, far-right project to create the Trump administration of 2025. And how he's like, I never heard of this. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And the dynamic inside the Republican Party, where a different kind of Republican regular, meaning Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, his campaign managers, are sending very clear signals that they are not going to let the Claremont Institute run America.
Or the Heritage
Foundation.
To run America. That was the Heritage Foundation.
Heritage or Claremont or whatever. They intend to run America and not cede the administration to these guys, which I think is interesting. And it's a power moment. And Trump is clearly with them. And he's been listening to them, and he hasn't been listening to the populist right as he's been running over the last 6 or 7 months. And that's an interesting development in and of itself. So we will get to that later in the week. And until then, for Seth, Christine, and Matt, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.